Delete this, wrong chat. My phone buzzed again, before I could even process the first message. I had just walked into my apartment after a 10-hour workday, my laptop bag still hanging from my shoulder, when my brother Ethan's name flashed across the screen. Attached was a screenshot. I tapped it. The top of the image read *family, planning ***. I wasn't in that group. Then I saw my mother's message. Ask Naomi about Dad's medication bill. My father replied almost immediately. She'll pay, she always does. A few lines lower came the message that stopped my breathing. Our family ATM is working overtime. And then Ethan's laughing emoji. Below it, my mother wrote, she's too stupid to realize we're using her. I slid down the kitchen cabinet and hit the floor so hard my coffee thermos rolled across the tile. My hands were shaking. That morning, before leaving for work, I had transferred $2,400 to my parents for what my mother called a *** retirement emergency ***. I opened the screenshot again, hoping I'd misread it. I hadn't. The emojis were still there. The timestamps were still there. Their names were still there. I started scrolling. The conversation didn't go back days. It went back years. One message referenced the beach trip I canceled because my parents needed help with property taxes. Another said, *Naomi's working late again. Good, our pension fund is clocking in. I pressed Ethan's number. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too small. On the bookshelf beside my desk sat the framed family photo from Christmas 3 years earlier. I remembered paying for that entire trip too. The cabin, the meals, even the matching sweaters my mother insisted would make the photos special. I picked up the frame and stared at their smiling faces. For years, I thought I was the dependable daughter. The good daughter. The daughter who stepped in when things got hard. But this wasn't one cruel joke. This was a business model. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my blazer, opened my banking app, and looked at the automatic transfer scheduled for the first of the month. My thumb hovered over the screen. Before I disappear from their lives, I whispered, they're going to learn exactly what they destroyed. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with the screenshot folded inside my purse like a legal document. Every red light felt longer than usual. As I pulled into the driveway, memories hit me in flashes. The winter, I paid for their new water heater because Dad said they couldn't survive another week without heat. The year I covered their insurance premiums after Mom cried on the phone about rising costs. The standing transfer, labeled ** retirement support * that left my account on the first of every month. The wedding invitation from my college roommate that I declined because my parents needed help paying a tax bill. I carried all of that with me as I walked through the front door. Naomi, my mother sang from the kitchen, our responsible girl is here. The words used to make me proud. Now they sounded rehearsed. Dad hugged me and said, I don't know what we'd do without your sacrifice. Sacrifice? In the screenshot, he'd called me an ATM. I sat at the breakfast table while Mom poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one she always used when she wanted something. I forced a smile. There might be some changes at work, I said casually. They're talking about cutting bonuses this year. The reaction was tiny, but I saw it. Mom's hand paused over the sugar bowl. Dad looked up too quickly. Then Mom said, well, we'll figure something out. Not are you okay? Not that stressful. Just irritation wrapped in politeness. I looked through the patio doors and noticed a brand new outdoor furniture set, deep gray cushions, a glass-top table, and a large umbrella that definitely wasn't there last month. When did you get that? I asked. Dad shrugged. Ethan found a deal. A deal. The same week, they'd told me Dad's medication costs were threatening their retirement. I set down my cup before my hands gave me away. Mom started describing a garden party she wanted to host, and I realized she was talking about centerpieces while I was still paying off the credit card I'd used for their emergency. I stood. "So soon?" Mom asked. "I have some things to take care of." I walked out without mentioning the screenshot. In the car, my phone buzzed. "Ethan, please don't tell them I sent that." I stared at the message until another bubble appeared. "I didn't mean for you to see it." The smell of grilled food hit me before I even stepped into the backyard. My parents' anniversary barbecue was already in full swing. Relatives crowded around folding tables, children ran through the grass, and my mother stood near the patio wearing a bright smile that suddenly looked theatrical. "There she is," Mom announced. "Our Naomi. I keep telling everyone we'd never survive retirement without her." Heads turned toward me. Aunt Denise clasped her hands. "You're such a blessing to your parents." Dad raised his drink. "She's the successful one in the family." Laughter. Admiring smiles. I smiled back automatically while hearing his message in my head. "Our family ATM is working overtime." Mom kissed my cheek as if nothing had happened. An hour earlier, I'd been reading a spreadsheet about how to ask me for money. Now they were presenting me as a devoted daughter in front of 20 people. I carried a bowl of fruit to the table when Aunt Denise leaned closer. "So, sweetheart, are you still helping with the monthly retirement support?" Every conversation around us seemed to fade. I set down the bowl carefully. "I'm reconsidering some financial arrangements," I said. Silence. Dad immediately laughed too loudly. "Accountants, always reviewing numbers." Mom's fingers tightened around my forearm hard enough to hurt. "We can talk later," she whispered through clenched teeth. Before I could answer, my cousin Rachel spoke up. "Oh, I saw Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda at Seabrook Cove last weekend. That resort looked gorgeous." I turned to my mother. "Seabrook Cove." Her smile flickered. "Just a little getaway." A little getaway. I'd skipped a vacation 3 years in a row because they said retirement was too expensive. Ethan arrived late carrying a tray of drinks. The moment he saw me, his expression collapsed. He pulled me toward the side gate. "The screenshot wasn't the worst part," he muttered. My stomach dropped. "There's a spreadsheet in the chat. They track everything you send." "What do you mean *track? Dates, amounts, excuses. I thought you knew you were helping them. I swear I didn't know they talked about you like that." Before I could ask another question, Mom called from the patio. "Everyone gather around. Robert wants to make a toast about family loyalty." Family loyalty. Ethan stepped back as if he'd already said too much. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new image from Ethan was loading. I looked down. The title across the top of the spreadsheet read, "Naomi, CONTRIBUTIONS." I sat in my car at the edge of the curb while the barbecue continued behind me. Laughter drifted over the fence. I zoomed in on the spreadsheet Ethan had sent. The first column listed dates. The second listed dollar amounts. The third made my stomach turn. "Ask after payday." I scrolled lower. "Use health excuse." "Mention loneliness." "Do not ask twice in same week." My pulse hammered in my ears. Beside a $3,200 transfer, Mom had written, "Vacation fund protected." Beside another payment, "Ethan tuition covered." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. This wasn't carelessness. It was strategy. I opened my banking app and searched my transfers to my parents. The total kept climbing. 10,000. 40,000. 90,000. When it passed *140,000*, I stopped counting and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. 6 years. 6 years of canceled plans, overtime shifts, and saying, "I can't afford it," while financing their life. My phone rang. Mom. I let it ring out. Then it rang again. And again. On the fourth call, I answered and hit record. Naomi, what's going on? Mom demanded. The transfer hasn't come through. We're counting on you, Dad said in the background. I kept my voice steady. What happened to the retirement account? Silence. I could hear a television somewhere in the house. Then Dad grabbed the phone. That money is none of your business. The line went dead. I stared at the black screen for a long moment. Then I started moving. I canceled the automatic monthly payment. I called my bank and removed myself from the joint emergency account my parents had insisted I be added to for convenience. I scheduled an appointment with my financial advisor for the next morning. Finally, I emailed the family attorney requesting copies of every document I had signed related to my parents' estate planning. My hands were no longer shaking. They were precise, controlled, almost cold. As I backed out of the parking spot, another message from Ethan appeared. There's something else you need to see before you confront them. I sat in my car at the edge of the curb while the barbecue continued behind me. Laughter drifted over the fence. I zoomed in on the spreadsheet Ethan had sent. The first column listed dates. The second listed dollar amounts. The third made my stomach turn. Ask after payday. I scrolled lower. Use health excuse. Mention loneliness. Do not ask twice in same week. My pulse hammered in my ears. Beside a $3,200 transfer, Mom had written, vacation fund protected. Beside another payment, Ethan tuition covered. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. This wasn't carelessness. It was strategy. I opened my banking app and searched my transfers to my parents. The total kept climbing. 10,000. 40,000. 90,000. When it passed asterisk 140, 000 asterisk asterisk, I stopped counting and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. 6 years. 6 years of canceled plans, overtime shifts, and saying, I can't afford it while financing their life. My phone rang. Mom. I let it ring out. Then it rang again. And again. On the fourth call, I answered and hit record. Naomi, what's going on? Mom demanded. The transfer hasn't come through. We're counting on you, Dad said in the background. I kept my voice steady. What happened to the retirement account? Silence. I could hear a television somewhere in the house. Then Dad grabbed the phone. That money is none of your business. The line went dead. I stared at the black screen for a long moment. Then I started moving. I canceled the automatic monthly payment. I called my bank and removed myself from the joint emergency account my parents had insisted I be added to for convenience. I scheduled an appointment with my financial advisor for the next morning. Finally, I emailed the family attorney requesting copies of every document I had signed related to my parents' estate planning. My hands were no longer shaking. They were precise, controlled, almost cold. As I backed out of the parking spot, another message from Ethan appeared. There's something else you need to see before you confront them. I met Ethan the next morning at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. He looked like he hadn't slept. The moment he sat down, he slid a folder across the table. I printed everything, he said quietly. Inside were pages of the group chat. Dozens of them. I turned one over and saw my mother's message from 8 months earlier. Naomi got a bonus. Ask for the roof repair before she books another trip. Another read. Don't mention the investment account. She'll start asking questions. My throat tightened. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed me a recent photo of Mom and Dad leaving a financial planner's office. I found this in the chat too, he said. They've been meeting with him for years. How much do they have? He looked away. Enough, more than enough. The room seemed to tilt. They weren't trying to survive retirement, I whispered. No. Ethan swallowed hard. They didn't want to touch their retirement portfolio. They wanted to keep the inheritance intact and maintain their lifestyle. They planned the requests. Mom would call about medications, Dad would follow up about taxes, and they'd decide who should ask you depending on when you got paid. I flipped to another page. Use Dad this time. She says yes faster when he sounds embarrassed. I closed the folder. Did you know? I knew you were helping them, he said quickly. I thought you wanted to. I swear, Naomi, I never saw the too stupid to realize message before that screenshot. That's why I panicked. For a moment, I saw my brother not as an accomplice, but as someone raised inside the same twisted family system. An hour later, I stood in my parents' living room. Mom smiled when she opened the door. Perfect timing. We were just talking about. I set the folder on the coffee table. Her smile disappeared. Dad walked in from the kitchen and stopped. What is this? He asked. Read it. Mom flipped through the pages, then laughed too quickly. Oh, Naomi, these are jokes. I pulled out the spreadsheet. Use health excuse. Ask after payday. Vacation fund protected. Which part is the joke? Dad's face hardened. Families help each other. I met his eyes. Families don't hold meetings about how to manipulate their daughter. Mom reached for my hand. I stepped back. You're overreacting, she whispered. I took my house key off my keychain and placed it on the table. Then I picked up the framed family photo from the mantel and set it beside the screenshots. You don't get my money anymore, I said. You don't get my time, and you don't get access to my life. Mom started crying then, not when I showed the evidence, but when she realized I meant it. I walked out while Dad called my name. I never turned around. That evening, I sent a single email to the relatives who had spent years telling me to take care of your parents. I attached the screenshots and wrote, I helped because I believed they needed me. I was wrong. The responses came within hours. Aunt Denise apologized for every guilt-filled conversation she'd ever had with me. Rachel called in tears. The family story changed overnight. For weeks, Dad left voicemails demanding we talk like adults. I blocked his number. Mom mailed handwritten letters. I returned them unopened. Ethan started therapy and admitted he'd spent his whole life trying to stay on our parents' good side. I redirected the canceled payments into my own retirement account. I paid off the last of my personal loan. 3 months later, I booked the beach vacation I had canceled years earlier. The confirmation email felt unreal. 6 months after that, I sat alone on a quiet stretch of sand with my feet in the water. My phone buzzed. Retirement contribution posted successfully. For the first time in years, that notification brought relief instead of dread. I opened my messages, found the old family chat, and pressed delete conversation ***. The thread vanished. The ocean rolled in and out, steady and indifferent. I looked at the horizon and finally understood something I should have learned long ago. The day my parents called me the family ATM was the day I finally became the owner of my own life.